There comes a moment in every human life when the ground beneath their feet begins to move, not all at once, not with the violence of an earthquake, but quietly. A friendship fades, a dream dies, a door closes, a season ends. And suddenly, the life that once felt familiar begins to feel like a house that no longer belongs to you. You look around and wonder, what is happening to me? Why is everything changing? Why does it feel like I am losing things I prayed to keep? Most people call this disaster. Most people call this bad luck. Most people call this failure. But what if it is none of those things? What if the collapse is not punishment? What if the ending is not destruction? What if the very thing you fear is actually mercy in disguise? Because there are seasons when heaven will allow certain structures to fall, not because they are evil, but because they are too small for the destiny that is trying to enter your life. Think carefully. A seed cannot become a tree unless it first ceases to be a seed. A caterpillar cannot become a butterfly unless its former identity dissolves. And a soul cannot enter a greater calling while clinging to a smaller version of itself. This is the secret many never discover. They spend years begging for restoration when heaven is preparing transformation. They ask for repairs while God is building something entirely new. And so they resist the very process designed to free them. Perhaps that is where you are today. Perhaps you are standing in the middle of unanswered questions. Perhaps you are watching plans unravel. Perhaps you are grieving things nobody else understands. And perhaps the silence feels unbearable. But listen carefully. Silence is not always absence. Sometimes silence is construction. A builder does not announce every nail he drives into the foundation. A sculptor does not explain every strike of the hammer. And often, the deepest work happens where human eyes cannot see. The soul grows in hidden places, faith grows in hidden places, strength grows in hidden places. The world celebrates visible success. Heaven often celebrates invisible transformation. There is a reason old patterns are breaking. There is a reason old desires no longer satisfy you. There is a reason certain people have disappeared from your journey. There is a reason the things that once defined you suddenly feel empty. You are not merely losing something. You are outgrowing something. And growth is rarely comfortable. The child fears the darkness of the womb ending. Yet that ending is called birth. The prisoner fears the uncertainty beyond the prison gate. Yet that uncertainty is called freedom. The traveler fears leaving familiar shores. Yet beyond those shores lies the destination. Many people spend their lives praying for change while secretly demanding comfort. But transformation has never been comfortable. Light enters by exposing darkness. Truth enters by challenging illusions. Freedom enters by breaking chains. And every one of those experiences feels painful before it feels beautiful. So do not measure your future by your present discomfort. Do not interpret temporary confusion as permanent defeat. Do not assume that, because you cannot see the road, there is no road. There are realities forming beyond your sight. There are answers moving toward you even now. There are doors being prepared that you could not have entered as the person you used to be. That old version of you had to end, not because it was worthless, but because it was incomplete. The greatest tragedy is not that life changes. The greatest tragedy is refusing to change with it. Some people spend decades mourning a season that heaven already finished. They build monuments to former identities, they worship old memories, they cling to expired versions of themselves. And in doing so, they miss the miracle standing at the door. Do not make that mistake. The chapter is ending. Let it end. The season is closing. Let it close. The old life is collapsing. Let it collapse. Because what feels like destruction may actually be divine preparation. What feels like loss may actually be release. What feels like abandonment may actually be redirection. One day you will look back on this season and understand. You will see connections that are invisible now. You will recognize wisdom hidden inside disappointment. You will discover purpose concealed within pain. And you will realize that the collapse was never your enemy. It was your invitation, an invitation to become someone deeper, someone wiser, someone stronger, someone capable of carrying blessings that the former version of you could never sustain. So stand firm, even when answers are scarce, even when emotions are heavy, even when tomorrow seems hidden behind a wall of uncertainty. Stand firm, because endings are not always endings. Sometimes they are introductions. Sometimes they are doorways. Sometimes they are the first whispers of a destiny finally awakening. And perhaps the reason your old life is collapsing is not because everything is falling apart. Perhaps it is because everything is finally falling into place. The pieces are moving. The story is unfolding. The transformation has already begun. And what waits beyond this season may be greater than anything you have dared to imagine. So do not fear the collapse. Walk through it, for on the other side of what is ending, a new life is waiting to begin. There are moments in life when everything familiar begins to crumble. The plans you carefully arranged no longer work. The relationships you depended on start to shift. The doors you expected to remain open suddenly close without explanation. What once felt stable now feels uncertain, and the future appears hidden behind a thick fog of unanswered questions. In these moments, the human heart naturally assumes the worst. It concludes that something has gone wrong. It believes the collapse must be evidence of failure, rejection, or defeat. Yet some of the most important transformations in life begin with what appears to be destruction. The greatest mistake many people make is assuming that every loss is a punishment. They see something leaving their lives and immediately conclude that they are being abandoned. They watch a dream fall apart and assume they have been forgotten. They experience a season of confusion and decide that their story is moving backward. But not every collapse is meant to destroy you. Some collapses are designed to prepare you. Preparation rarely looks the way people expect. Most imagine preparation as a season of visible progress, clear direction, and steady advancement. They expect preparation to feel encouraging and exciting. Yet some of the deepest forms of preparation happen through removal rather than addition. Before new growth can emerge, old structures often have to be dismantled. Before a greater purpose can take shape, lesser attachments must loosen their grip. Before a new chapter begins, an old one must finally come to an end. Consider how often nature follows this pattern. The tree sheds its leaves before new growth appears. The seed disappears beneath the soil before it becomes something greater. What looks like an ending on the surface is often the beginning of a process hidden from view. Yet because the transformation is invisible at first, many mistake it for loss. Human beings are deeply attached to familiarity. Even when something no longer serves them, they often cling to it because it feels safe. Familiar pain can seem less frightening than unfamiliar possibility. Familiar limitations can feel more comfortable than unknown opportunities. As a result, people sometimes resist the very changes that could lead them into a better future. This resistance creates unnecessary suffering. Instead of asking what the collapse might be producing, they focus only on what it is taking away. Instead of seeking the lesson within the disruption, they become consumed by the discomfort of the disruption itself. Their attention remains fixed on what is ending, making it impossible to recognize what is beginning. There are seasons when life removes supports you never intended to lean on. Certain identities, ambitions, habits, and expectations become so deeply connected to your sense of self that you cannot imagine life without them. Yet if those things remain untouched, they can quietly limit your growth. They can keep you confined to a smaller vision of who you are capable of becoming. Preparation often involves exposing those limitations. It reveals where your confidence has been misplaced. It reveals where your priorities have become distorted. It reveals where fear has quietly been directing your decisions. This process is rarely comfortable because it challenges the stories you tell yourself. It forces you to confront realities you would rather avoid. It invites you to release things you once considered essential. Yet within that discomfort lies an opportunity for profound transformation. Many people pray for greater purpose while resisting the process that creates it. They ask for strength but avoid difficulty. They desire wisdom but reject challenges. They seek growth but resist change. What they fail to understand is that the qualities they desire are often developed through the very experiences they wish to escape. Strength emerges through resistance. Wisdom emerges through experience. Character emerges through testing. Gift emerges through struggle. The collapse of an old life often creates the conditions necessary for these qualities to develop. It removes distractions. It exposes weaknesses. It breaks unhealthy dependencies. It forces a person to discover resources within themselves they never knew existed. What feels like instability may actually be the beginning of a stronger foundation. What feels like uncertainty may actually be creating room for greater clarity. What feels like loss may actually be making space for something more aligned with your purpose. There is a hidden danger in always getting what you want when you want it. Immediate success can prevent necessary growth. Constant comfort can produce stagnation. Uninterrupted progress can create illusions that eventually collapse under pressure. Sometimes the obstacles you resent today are protecting you from limitations you cannot yet see. Preparation requires patience because its results are not always immediate. During the process, there may be little evidence that anything meaningful is happening. The outward signs of success may disappear. The old sources of security may vanish. The future may remain unclear. Yet unseen work is still taking place. New perspectives are forming. Old fears are losing their influence. Greater resilience is being developed. A deeper understanding of yourself is emerging. The collapse may feel chaotic because you can only see one chapter of the story. You cannot yet see how the pieces connect. You cannot yet see what future opportunities are being created by present disruptions. You cannot yet see how today's disappointments may become tomorrow's turning points. What appears to be falling apart may actually be separating what is temporary from what is essential. It may be revealing what truly matters. It may be clearing away obstacles that have stood in the way of your growth for years. It may be preparing you for responsibilities, relationships, opportunities, and purposes that require a stronger, wiser, and more mature version of yourself. The collapse is not always evidence that you are losing your way. Sometimes it is evidence that you are being prepared for a road you could not have traveled as the person you used to be. One of the most painful experiences in life is watching something leave that you desperately wanted to keep. It may be a relationship that once brought you joy. It may be a dream you spent years pursuing. It may be an opportunity you believed would change everything. When these things slip away, the immediate reaction is usually grief. The heart interprets the loss as evidence that something valuable has been taken. Questions begin to rise from deep within. Why did this happen? Why couldn't it stay? Why does it feel as though everything important is disappearing? Yet there is a truth that many people discover only after years of reflection. Not everything that leaves your life is meant to remain there forever. Some things do not disappear because they failed you. Some things disappear because they completed their purpose. What feels like loss may actually be a sign that you have grown beyond what once seemed essential. Growth changes people in ways they do not immediately recognize. A person can evolve emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and even morally without fully realizing how much they have changed. The desires that once motivated them begin to lose their power. The environments that once felt comfortable start to feel restrictive. The conversations that once seemed meaningful begin to feel empty. The goals that once consumed their attention no longer inspire the same excitement. This transition often creates confusion because outwardly everything may appear the same. The familiar people are still present. The familiar routines still exist. The familiar opportunities remain available. Yet internally, something has shifted. The soul senses that it can no longer remain where it once belonged. Many people resist this realization because they mistake familiarity for destiny. They assume that because something has been part of their life for a long time, it must continue indefinitely. They cling to old seasons long after those seasons have fulfilled their purpose. They hold tightly to identities they have already outgrown. They remain loyal to versions of themselves that no longer reflect who they are becoming. There is a difference between appreciating the past and living inside it. The past can teach valuable lessons. It can provide cherished memories. It can remind you of important chapters in your journey. But the past was never meant to become a permanent residence. Growth requires movement. Growth requires expansion. Growth requires the courage to release what once fit so that something greater can emerge. A child eventually outgrows childhood clothes. The clothes themselves are not bad. They served their purpose. They provided comfort and protection during a particular season. Yet if the child refuses to let them go, what was once useful becomes restrictive. What once supported growth begins to limit it. The same principle applies to many areas of life. Certain relationships belong to a specific chapter. Certain ambitions belong to a specific stage of development. Certain beliefs, habits, and expectations serve a purpose for a time, but eventually become too small for the person you're becoming. The difficulty is that outgrowing something often feels remarkably similar to losing it. Both experiences involve separation. Both experiences involve change. Both experiences require adjustment. Because the emotions can feel nearly identical, many people misinterpret growth as tragedy. They mourn opportunities that no longer align with their purpose. They chase versions of success that no longer satisfy their spirit. They attempt to revive seasons that have already reached their natural conclusion. This struggle creates unnecessary exhaustion because they are fighting to preserve what growth is trying to release. There are moments when life gently reveals that something no longer belongs in your future. The excitement fades, the connection weakens, the sense of purpose diminishes. The fulfillment once attached to a particular pursuit disappears. These changes are not always signs of failure. Sometimes they are signs of transformation. The person you were 5 years ago may have needed different things than the person you are today. The dreams that once motivated you may have been stepping stones rather than final destinations. The goals that once seemed essential may have simply guided you toward a deeper understanding of yourself. Growth is not always about gaining new things. Sometimes growth is about developing the wisdom to recognize when something has become too small for your future. A person can spend years trying to preserve a chapter that was only meant to last a season. They can become so focused on holding on that they miss opportunities waiting just beyond their field of vision. Fear often fuels this attachment. People fear that releasing something means they will never find anything better. They fear uncertainty. They fear change. They fear the possibility of disappointment. As a result, they remain connected to situations that no longer inspire growth simply because those situations feel predictable. But comfort and purpose are not always the same thing. Familiarity and fulfillment are not always the same thing. Stability and growth are not always the same thing. There are seasons when remaining where you are becomes more dangerous than moving forward. When you outgrow something, your spirit begins to recognize limitations that once went unnoticed. You start sensing that there is more to learn, more to become, and more to experience. New questions emerge, new desires awaken. New possibilities begin to call for your attention. This does not mean you should despise what came before. Gratitude remains important. Every season contributes something valuable to your development. Every chapter contains lessons that shape your character. Every experience leaves traces of wisdom that can guide future decisions. But gratitude should never become an excuse for stagnation. Honoring the past does not require living there forever. Appreciating a chapter does not require extending it beyond its purpose. Respecting what once helped you does not mean refusing to embrace what is now calling you forward. Some of the things you are grieving today may not actually be meant for your future. Some of the things you are struggling to hold together may already be teaching you how to let go. Some of the doors that have closed may be revealing that your path no longer leads in that direction. Some of the desires that are fading may simply be evidence that your heart is being prepared for something larger, deeper, and more aligned with the person you are becoming. There are moments in life when the very things that once brought comfort begin to disappear. A familiar relationship changes. A dependable opportunity vanishes. A long-held plan suddenly collapses. In those moments, the human heart often responds with confusion. It asks why something that felt so important had to be taken away. It wonders why peace has been replaced with uncertainty and why stability has given way to struggle. Most people naturally associate comfort with blessing. They assume that if something makes them feel secure, it must be meant to remain forever. They believe that what is familiar is automatically what is best. Yet history, experience, and spiritual growth repeatedly reveal a different reality. Not everything that comforts you is helping you grow. Not everything that feels safe is leading you toward your purpose. Sometimes the very things that provide comfort can quietly become barriers to the life you are meant to live. Comfort is powerful because it asks very little of us. It allows routines to become permanent. It encourages familiar patterns to continue unchallenged. It creates an environment where change feels unnecessary. At first, this seems beneficial. There is relief in knowing what tomorrow will look like. There is reassurance in staying within established boundaries. There is security in avoiding risk and uncertainty. But comfort has a hidden danger. It can convince a person that survival is the same as fulfillment. It can persuade them to settle for what is predictable rather than pursue what is meaningful. It can gradually shrink their vision until they become satisfied with far less than they were capable of becoming. Many people spend years living inside limitations simply because those limitations feel familiar. They remain in environments that no longer challenge them. They continue habits that no longer serve them. They hold on to identities that no longer reflect their potential. Not because they lack ability, but because comfort whispers that change is too costly. The problem is that purpose rarely reveals itself within the boundaries of complete comfort. Purpose calls people beyond what is familiar. It invites them into places where certainty is limited and faith becomes necessary. It asks them to grow beyond current capacities. It challenges assumptions, exposes weaknesses, and stretches character. This process often begins with removal. Something that once seemed permanent begins to shift. Something trusted begins to fade. Something relied upon becomes unavailable. From a human perspective, these moments feel like loss. They feel unfair. They feel disruptive. Yet what appears to be a setback may actually be an invitation. When a person becomes too dependent on comfort, they can lose sight of deeper callings. Their energy becomes focused on preserving convenience rather than pursuing growth. Their decisions become guided by safety rather than purpose. Their attention becomes fixed on maintaining the present rather than preparing for the future. There are seasons when life interrupts that pattern. A closed door forces new thinking. A disappointment creates new perspective. A challenge awakens hidden strength. An unexpected change reveals possibilities that would have remained invisible otherwise. At first, these experiences feel painful because they remove familiar sources of security. Human beings naturally resist uncertainty. They prefer clear answers over unanswered questions. They prefer established paths over unexplored territory. They prefer known outcomes over unknown possibilities. Yet many of life's most significant transformations emerge from uncertainty. Courage cannot develop where there is no fear. Faith cannot deepen where there is no challenge. Resilience cannot strengthen where there is no resistance. Wisdom cannot mature without experience. The things that comfort you often protect you from discomfort, but they may also protect you from growth. They may shield you from situations that would reveal your true capabilities. They may prevent you from discovering strengths that only emerge under pressure. They may keep you attached to a smaller vision of yourself. This is why periods of removal can carry hidden purpose. A person may lose an opportunity only to discover a calling they never considered. They may lose a relationship only to develop a deeper understanding of themselves. They may lose a familiar path only to uncover a direction far more aligned with their future. What initially appears to be deprivation can become revelation. Many of the greatest turning points in life begin with disruption rather than clarity. They begin with questions rather than answers. They begin with endings rather than beginnings. Looking back, people often realize that what felt like a devastating loss was actually a necessary redirection. At the time, however, the process rarely feels positive. The mind focuses on what is missing. The heart focuses on what has changed. The emotions focus on what has been taken away. Very few people immediately recognize what is being created through the experience, yet beneath the surface, something important is often happening. Old dependencies are being exposed, misplaced priorities are being corrected, new capacities are being developed. A deeper sense of purpose is beginning to emerge. The removal of comfort creates space for reflection. It forces a person to examine what truly matters. It reveals where their identity has become tied to temporary things. It challenges assumptions that have gone unquestioned for years. It invites a more honest evaluation of direction, priorities, and purpose. Without these interruptions, many people would continue moving through life without ever recognizing how much of their potential remained dormant. They would stay within the boundaries of what feels safe. They would continue choosing familiarity over growth. They would never discover the strength hidden beneath their fears or the possibilities hidden beyond their comfort zones. Purpose often requires a level of courage that comfort cannot produce. It requires a willingness to move forward without complete certainty. It requires trust during seasons of transition. It requires perseverance when the destination remains unclear. The removal of comfort is not always evidence that something good has been taken away. Sometimes it is evidence that something greater is trying to emerge. Sometimes the familiar must loosen its grip so that deeper calling can be heard. Sometimes the things you depend on must be shaken so that you can discover what truly sustains you. Sometimes the life you have become comfortable living must be disrupted so that the life you were created to live can finally begin to reveal itself.